Welcome to a special edition of Inside the Plant, brought to you by United Prairie, your source for real world agronomy insights, fertilizer updates, and conversations with the people out in the field making it happen every day. I'm Josh Rund, and on today's special edition of Inside the Plant, we're having a conversation about fungicide and the challenges we face with getting nitrogen to this crop. I'm joined again by Kyle Meece to get more information as we enter a critical time in the growing season. Kyle, thanks for visiting with me today.
Josh, thanks again for having me on. There's a lot going on out in the fields right now, and I'm glad we get a chance to do this today just to kind of maybe try to ease some growers' minds, but I know that's a bit of a challenge right now.
Yeah, so let's start out with, does this corn crop even have enough nitrogen to reach its full potential right now?
Yeah, so I think every situation is going to be different based off of what your strategy is for nitrogen application. Whether you're a fall applied guy, maybe followed with some weed and feed, or a spring applied guy with some additional weed and feed. Where's the side dress? And I'm going to focus in on side dress right now because it's probably the biggest obstacle that we're facing. We all know that we just had a substantial amount of rain. Some areas a lot worse than others here the last 2 or 3 weeks. So we're fortunate as a company. We started on side dress early. We try to every year just because the volume of workload we have and the fear that this crop could get away from us. But right now we're left with quite a few thousand acres that don't have all the growers' demands and needs for nitrogen on it. So could we say some of this crop doesn't have enough? Yeah, I think in some scenarios it could have enough, but again, that all comes back to what your total nitrogen target is and what your nitrogen use efficiency is. I know for myself, just speaking from our own farming operation, we have a little over 300 acres of side dress still to do. We're sitting out there right now with about 140 pounds. Do I feel like that's enough? I don't. I feel like I could use a little bit more. So now what are the options to apply the rest of that? Some others, I've talked to, we're in a little bit higher range of the amount of N that we still have left to apply. Same thing from a side dress standpoint. We've just had so much success for the last number of years managing our nitrogen application in different segments and really feeding that crop when it needs it. And when you look at a corn crop, highest nitrogen uptake starts at V8 and ends at VT, and that's what we're approaching right now. So this plant is just demanding it's going on overtime for nitrogen uptake. So we're trying to make sure we're preparing it for what it needs.
Yeah, so I remember we had an episode a few back with Anthony Kahn, and Anthony talked about side dress and side dress application, and he hit on just what you did, starting early, trying to get that in early. Now, you said that there are some farmers out there, and there's going to be some growers that listen to this that are not quite as on target as some of our other ones as far as getting the nitrogen to their crop and splitting their application. What do you think has caused farmers and now us retailers to have this trouble getting this final shot of nitrogen here?
So Mother Nature, first and foremost. I mean, being timely and when we're going to start things is one, but then Mother Nature just is throwing this one heck of a curveball. And I'm going to tell you, I went home to try to side dress some stuff last week one evening. And when I got done, my intern Lucas, who's sitting here with us right now, and was telling my dad and my brother, I don't farm this way. I don't do research this way. But when you're trying to side dress, unfortunately, in some cases in the mud, it was absolutely awful. And you can't stay off the crop. And the problem is that we're running through is that there's, say 80% of the field could be fine. But when you have a draw that's running through the center of the field and you've got to go back and forth and cross that draw every time, it just makes it almost impossible to get it done and feel like you're doing a good job. So, I mean, a lot of it, again, it's all derived from Mother Nature. Obviously, what's helping a lot is those who have system tiled farms. That's a big game changer. It's a big game changer up to the point of when the drainage ditches are full and there's no place for the water to go. I would say field capacity is still much lower in those. So those are the ones we're focusing on first and foremost. When things do dry up, we should be able to get across those better. But we got to have the surplus of water that's sitting in these drainage ditches just keep moving south before we can get them drained the rest of the way.
Yeah, so you're talking about when it dries up, we're going to have the ability to get out there. But what are our options now? Because when I look outside and I'm driving through the countryside, some of our corn crop is darn near taller than I am. And I'm almost, I'm at 6 feet tall and that corn is at my shoulders and getting taller. What are going to be the options for those farmers that need that last shot of nitrogen?
You betcha. So what we're looking at now, as a company in the past, we did have a set of Y drops. we used them, but they were not the most efficient things in the world based off the volume of workload that was requested of us and the fact that we were traveling all over the place. So we got rid of them. Well, come today, we're going to have a set that we're putting back on. The only Hagee sprayer I believe we have left as a company. So we're going to have that as an option to get in there on some of this stuff. It's probably going to be one of our best options. Now, there is a lot of growers that still have wide drops. So, we may be going to them and asking if they can do some custom for us, depending on when we can get back in the field. Now, with the range of planting dates that we had across our whole trade territory, there's going to be fields that we're still going to be able to get across with pull type bars, no problem, whether that be ammonia and or 32% side dress. So I'm optimistic that maybe the latter part of this week, that maybe there'll be a chance to get back in the field in some places. We were fortunate, fortunate yesterday, as we didn't get to 2 to 3 inches they were talking about in most areas. I think it was anywhere from 8/10 to 1.5 inches. Well, when it's wet to begin with, it's just still wetter, but I'm hoping we can get across some of that stuff. We've got some seed corn production that, that crop is small based off the different planting dates for it, so we can get in there. So the wide drops would be one option we're looking at. Urea broadcast is something else that we've talked about. We do have some machines at a couple locations that are airflow machines that can get across the top of this plant. The other side with urea is I've been talking with a good friend of mine, Steve Adams with Adams Aerial, and Steve says, we can fly urea on no problem. And it's been many, many years, but I've had to do this before in a similar situation. The problem with that is just the overall economics of it. Most of us have 32% or ammonia bought in at a prepay based price. And to go back to the market today, we would see urea up around $1 to even more, a little over $1 per unit of N. Take that on top of the application expense, whether it be from an airplane or even our rigs running across. And then the fact is, again, when can we get across it? So that's something that we're thinking about there. The wide drop probably sounds a little bit more economical because we're sitting on good supply of 32%, and most guys have that locked in. But those are the options that we're left with. I did this weekend. I spent all day Saturday going in with the drone, trying some different applications of some nitrogen-based products, whether that be something like a Utrisha N or an amino. Those are a couple that I was targeting in on, as well as some experimental stuff. We'll see how that pans out. The problem is with that is, you're making the application, which is great, but it's usually not the amount of N that you need to finish the crop off. You're getting small bursts of N, you're getting a better efficiency, but you can't turn around with the drone and say, hey, I need an extra 60, 80, 100 pounds and expect you're going to get it all on with one trip.
Okay, good. So thank you, Kyle, for that information. So once again, if you're a farmer that's out there, a grower out there, and you're getting nervous looking at this corn crop, looking at how fast it's growing with the moisture we've got out there, and then the heat coming kind of towards the middle of this week to end of this week too, there are options for you out there to try and get this nitrogen to your crop, so you can still have a very sustainable, very, very good corn crop to finish out the year. So Kyle, looking at this season, what are some lessons that we can learn as farmers, as retailers, when we look back at this spring when it comes to nitrogen and how we go about our nitrogen strategy from 26 to 27?
Well, I think just being timely in our applications, Ben, our operations manager, and I, we always talk about when we start side dress and doing custom ammonia is that we're always looking for beer can high corn. Once we hit beer can high corn, we're rolling. And I know for some of you, you're sitting there thinking, well, gosh darn, I may have just put my pre-plant weed and feed on 2 weeks earlier or 2.5 weeks earlier. I get that, but think about the placement of that nitrogen versus the root growth of the plant itself. We're putting that placement of side dress nitrogen 15 inches over. And if that nitrogen is going to move, it's going to move vertically through the profile. Your root system isn't there yet. So there's still a delayed timing from when the root system is going to get to that nitrogen band. So just because we're going out there early and you feel like, well, I could have just put this on in the same trip, I still look at it differently as we're still managing accordingly. And by the time it gets there, we're getting closer to that rapid uptake side of things. So starting early and just being efficient from that standpoint is still a big deal. When it comes to putting all your eggs in that fall basket, I'm still not one to be doing that. I think there's too much risk versus reward. Do I think a good foundation out there in the fall is great? Absolutely. But we still need some weed and feed. And for me, for years, I've been with United Prairie for 20 years now. I've always looked at, I need 30 to 50 pounds of N to get me going in a corn following soybean rotation. And if it's a corn on corn, I'm wanting 60 to 90. And in addition to that, I want to make sure that I'm putting some sulfur out there typically for what we're using in the form of ammonium thiosulfate. Those two products, they with 32 and ATS, complement each other. That sulfur helps that plant in utilizing those nitrogen sources. Plus, you're getting a little bit of a nitrogen source out of the ATS as well. So I still think we got to manage accordingly, but we got to start as early as we possibly can, because we've been fortunate for the last number of years to not get into a bind like this. And, we're facing it this year, and I still feel like we started early, but it's just, heavy rains have come in some spots, and it's just been more challenging.
Yeah, once again, I'll go back to our episode with Anthony Kahn if you want to go back and take a listen. But Anthony hits on the same thing, starting early. Okay, split that application, start early, just like Kyle said, trying to get out there and get this in the ground. So kind of switching gears here, we were talking about the weather, talking about how we're wet. 2026 is significantly wetter than 2025, especially if we look at year to year, date to date. When do our farmers now need to start thinking about fungicide application to protect against disease that might be out there in that crop?
You bet. No, that's a great question, and I know I've had that question already here. Really, ever since these rainfalls really started, because some growers I've talked with, they've got such big challenges in their fields that they're really debating, how much additional money do I invest into this? And that is a valid point. And I can't make that decision for you, listeners. I think you have to take that on a case by case basis. Because I think one of the big questions that I'm getting is, what can I do to help stimulate this plant even more, help it through this stress time? Because we look at dry stresses and we look at too wet stresses. They're both stresses, but what can we do to help overcome that? Well, I think there's some steps? Absolutely. There's some things that we've been looking at for the last number of years. And one of those, potentials is looking at fungicide. So when should growers start thinking about it? If you're not thinking about it right now, as the weeks are coming, I think you should start. I have historically, the last 3 or 4 years, our disease potential has been lower here in this part of the world. Now I can get to our Danvers location and Cowden location and up at Crescent City and Hoopston. They've been a little bit different. They've had heavy disease pressure. We haven't had as much here. So I have a tendency in lower disease pressure years that I'll try to push my fungicide applications back a little bit longer. Maybe not trying to hit that vegetative tassel, but maybe it's an R1, or a 50% brown silk or full brown silk. My mindset right now is I'm going to be looking at the front end of things, and I'm going to monitor Mother Nature and the weather. We can, and I won't go through all this today, but as we look at, our disease triangle and the ingredients that it needs, and then understanding certain disease, whether it's in a corn crop or a soybean crop, the conditions it takes for those to start generating. I think we have to keep that in the back of our head. Was tar spot going to be something? Well, tar spot sometimes, as we found, likes to thrive in these little cooler environments and heavy, damp conditions. But will we get it? Time will tell. We're watching, the Tar Spotter app and some other things, and talking to universities. We found last year, even with dry, we saw tar spots in places. So I think it's still a disease that we're trying to figure out and understand. Southern rust was bad last year. That usually comes with drier conditions. Well, I look at next week and we're going to get back up in the upper 80s and potentially low 90s. So we're kind of pivoting back and forth. So again, the original question, when do you need to thinking about it and start having conversations with your sales agronomist or your seed specialist? I think it's right now. We start planning and we start understanding, we start monitoring this crop.
Yeah, I think in the next few weeks we'll tell the tale too, especially as we get to the end of this week, get to the beginning of July. July typically, we're getting close to the 4th of July and it gets hotter and blazes out there typically this time of year. So with the moisture, with this dry weather and the heat, that'll be a cesspool for disease to start. So I think as our crop scout interns go out there and start scouting these fields and are spending more time out there, we'll just have to, like you said, see what they find, and then we'll plan accordingly.
Absolutely. The biggest key to understand, and I go through this every year with growers as I'm walking fields, is if we're walking out in the field and we don't see disease pressure, and we say, well, okay, I don't need fungicide, I don't see disease yet. Guys, gals, the key is to be proactive, not reactive. I don't want to walk into a mess. I want to prevent that mess from starting up. So being timely, once again, it's kind of, I think that's kind of the theme word here, is being timely in your decision making and your applications. But let's be ready to pull that trigger when we need to early. Use the right fungicide, use the right rate, so we can hopefully stretch out a little bit residual of that and try to get ahead of the onset of something that can be devastating for our crop. But again, in that same token, you're going to have to, it's going to be a field by field basis, because I fully understand and realize there's some farms that's going to be tough to invest the extra dollars in when 50, 60, 70% of it could be severely damaged by, saturated conditions or hail or winds or whatever's been thrown at us.
Yeah. So, Kyle, in your opinion, once again, Kyle Meece is our agronomy manager here at United Prairie, been with the company for 20 years in multiple different capacities here. But Kyle's also a farmer. So, Kyle, what, in your opinion, is the next step for a farmer? Is the next step to be having those conversations with their United Prairie agronomist? Or do farmers need to start going out and scouting their fields here in the next couple of weeks themselves? What are you going to be doing?
I think what you just said there, Josh, goes hand in hand. I think that you got to have good communication with your sales agronomist, your seed specialist, but I think it's also going to take you getting out there and looking some of this stuff. And this isn't the 55-mile-an-hour drive-by scout. And I realize the fields are muddy, but you got to get out in these fields and take a look at them yourself. The amount of workload that we have as a company that your sales agronomists and seed specialists are dealing with, it's going to be very challenging for them to get to every single farm. So your best tool right now is yourself. Getting out there, monitoring that stuff. If you don't know what you're looking at or you have questions, you send those pictures. Send them to me. You send them to your sales agronomist, your seed specialist, so we can understand what's going on out there. But for myself, I spent all day Saturday making some drone applications. Some of that stuff was things that I'm looking at on fields that we couldn't side dress fully. I mentioned the story earlier, trying to go through some of this mud, and I think I had the bar raised at times more than in the ground. I finally had to pull out, and I don't know what we're going to do on those, but I tried to go in with some products that I've been working with for the last number of years to see if I can get that last, 30, 40 pound uptick just to get me by for a little bit longer. I'm also, other thing guys are looking at right now is, do you have your secondary post application on? I never thought I'd say this, but I have this fear that there is going to be some fields that are just not going to get post sprayed when it comes to corn this year. And I'm fortunate. We went down with a very strong fall burn down, which is, I can't promote this enough. This is something to talk about at harvest time, and Josh and I will hit on this later. That fall burn down was phenomenal, and it kept those fields clean for more months than I ever imagined. But going down with that, then getting a very strong residual down at a good rate has kept cornfields relatively clean. Yeah, the field edges are what the field edges are and may have to border some stuff, but that's an evaluation that we're going to make. And I'm also going to continue. I got, our focus is right now is trying to get the foliar trials on the research farm. I got it side dressed before the biggest rain, but we're trying to get some of those foliar trials on so we can understand different stress mitigation products, some early fungicide, some different micronutrients that we're messing with. So I think all those can fall into not just my mindset, but all farmers' mindsets. So these are things that we can still do to manage this crop. But boots in the field is the best thing you can possibly do, is get out there and take a look and see what's going on.
Awesome. And Kyle, I agree with you there. I feel like driving around the countryside, I've seen some of the cleanest fields that I'd ever seen in my time, just paying attention to that. In my last 20, 25 years, I've been looking out there. Our fields look good. And so a lot of that goes to credit to the retailer, credit to the farmer for paying attention, having a good program out there to take care of that stuff. And I would say farmers, the other thing, if you don't want to get out there in the field because it's muddy, because of the conditions, get your children, get your grandkids. That's what I did. We had a windstorm come through and I blew some stuff out of our yard into the neighbor's field. And I send my son through that muddy mess to get that stuff. So you send your kids out there with a camera, they'll take pictures of everything and get it back to you if you don't want to walk in that mud. So.
Well, Josh, just to add on that, I was listening to the podcast you did with Casey Hedinger the end of last week, and, very driven around technology. And I can't think of a more practical technology device than drones right now. And I think there's a lot of farmers that have them. If you don't have them yourself, I guarantee you your kids, grandkids, or somebody, they would be just as interested to have one. And every member of our crop scouting intern team, as well as Lucas, my advanced agronomy intern, we provide them drones for the season. We get them their Part 107 license. And it is just a different view and a different perspective of that field. I'm taking pictures. We're going to go up today and take some pictures of some drainage issues for a customer of mine, just so he can provide some information back to the farm managers and his landlords on what are potential tile projects that we could be looking at going in the future. And just really what this crop looks like from an aerial perspective.
Awesome, Kyle. Thank you very much. So, Kyle, what do you want to leave farmers with today about the current field conditions paired with the weather outlook. When I look at the NOAA weather outlook for the rest of June and going into July, we're going to continue to be wet is what they're telling us. And so what do you have as kind of your final message, knowing some of that information?
It's hard not to get caught up in what the weather is showing us and what those extended forecasts is. And as much as, and trust me, I am a high anxiety individual. So trying to calm myself down at times, well, it sometimes takes a little bit more than just, sometimes takes some medication to get you calmed down. So just to be brutally honest.
Yep. I'm laughing because it's true. It's funny because it's true.
But I mean, guys, gals, we just got to sit back a little bit. I mean, the cards are dealt with what they are. There's not a lot of things that we can do to overcome it, but when we have those opportunities to get out there and make an impact on our crop, and we have a little bit of a dry condition, maybe we can't do anything till 2-3 in the afternoon. You're like, do I really fire something up at that point in time? I think the answer to the question is yes. We need to be prepared to get out there anytime we need to and help manage this crop. I hate giving up on anything. I'm not one to give up on anything. So I'm going to try to manage this crop all the way through to get a few more bushels, because we need those bushels and we need a grain price to help us, continue to be successful in this business. So, don't give up. As frustrating as it is and as challenging as it is as farmers today. And the other thing that I'll say, and I do this on a regular basis, talk with those around you that are experiencing the same thing. Don't get so down in the dumps about it that it just eats you alive and you can't sleep at night, but visit with your surrounding, visit with your family, talk to them about it. Sometimes it just helps get some things off your chest, and you realize that you're not the only one that's sitting in this camp. We're all sitting in the same one.
Heck yeah, get out and talk to your dog. If anything, man, that thing will listen to you. I promise. Yeah. So thank you, Kyle, for visiting with me today on kind of a special edition of Inside the Plant, dealing with some of the nitrogen challenges that we're facing, and then fungicide decisions that our farmers are going to have to make here within the next, right now, to be honest with you, right now, within the next couple of weeks. And for everybody listening, this is exactly what we like in Inside the Plant. It's these real conversations, trying to make real decisions in real time. So thank you for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe, share it with someone else out there that you know. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Inside the Plant, brought to you by United Prairie.